Hey guys, what's up? Pastor Tanner here. Just getting some more sermon prep going. Hopefully this setup doesn't crash on me. I've had issues with it in the past, but hopefully I don't have any issues tonight. See, the nice thing is I got a second screen now compared to yesterday, so I'll be able to interact with you guys and see your messages more clearly. Alright, where were we on this thing? Okay, I had settled on Life to Come as the title. And my proposition was because the dead are raised, we ought to live. And so that's kind of where we're starting tonight. And hopefully I can make some decent progress on this thing. Because the dead are raised, we ought to live. And I had a pretty good intro that I felt was strong. So what I think we need to do here, I don't think we need more commentaries. I think I need to begin to formulate my main points. So this is what I had originally. So let's start rolling with that. The dead are raised. It's point number one. And these can change, but these are just preliminary for right now. Kind of proving the formal portion of the proposition. Life to come. And God is life. I think these will roll for now. The dead are raised. Life to come. And God is life. Now here I want to say something about contemporary culture, because in contemporary culture and society, it's not at all taken for granted that the dead are raised. There are a lot of perspectives out there that say the dead are not raised, that when you die you're just dead, and that needs to be addressed. I actually watched a video on YouTube, which was a philosopher, a guy who had been a philosophy professor, and he had previously written a book early on in his philosophy career on death. And he essentially said, well, no one should be afraid to die. The man is 97 now. And they interviewed him and said, do you still agree with your book that you'd originally written, that man shouldn't be afraid to die? And he said he completely disagrees with what he had previously written. He thinks about death every day because he's 97 now, and it's more real to him. It's less abstract. So we need to address that idea. Now I had two ideas when it came to this. First, Jesus meets the Sadducees where they're at. Then the Sadducees, who say there's no resurrection, came to him with a question. And here's an important aspect down here. He says, are you not in error because you do not know the scriptures nor the power of God? When the dead rise, they will neither marry nor be given in marriage. They will be like the angels in heaven. Now about the dead rising, have you not read in the book of Moses? Jesus here is meeting the Sadducees where they're at because the Sadducees only believed in the book of Moses. And so he's actually quoting their scriptures to them to prove a point. And so that's an essential aspect, an essential truth. Let's see which verse that was. (26). So in verse 26, Jesus meets the Sadducees where they're at. Which is a very, very helpful idea. Because we ought to meet people where they're at. Oftentimes, you'll talk to a Christian who's judging coworkers, family members, friends, and they judge them because they're not living their life in a godly way. But Jesus met them where they are at, and so too we ought to meet people where they are at. So that's verse 26. And then the other thing, the other aspect, is Jesus isn't milquetoast about it, however. He challenges them directly by telling them, are you not in error because you do not know the scriptures or the power of God? He quotes their scriptures and says they don't know them. Like, I don't know if there's a stronger way you can try to challenge somebody and point out their flaws and faults, right? And then at the end, of course, he says you are badly mistaken. So, and those are the self-evident ways in which he challenges them. He also brings up angels, and angels are not something the Sadducees believed in either. Jesus challenges directly. So he does that by bringing up angels. Verse 25. And Jesus, of course, isn't ignorant that they don't believe in angels. Verse 25. And in verse 25, does he explicitly challenge them? No, he does that in 24. So verse 24, verse 27, and then verse 25. A lot of this is challenging to them. Verse 24. Jesus challenges directly. Verse 24, verse 27, and verse 25, which is more subtle. Angels. In error and badly mistaken. All of these are direct challenges that Jesus is not afraid to bring out. So we have in this passage both a Jesus who will meet people where they're at. He doesn't mind quoting the Sadducee scriptures. He doesn't deliberately try to fight them or, tell them, well, let me quote from Isaiah, which they didn't accept Isaiah. He doesn't do any of that. He meets them where they're at and quotes their scriptures. But by the same token, once he quotes their scriptures, he challenges them directly. And so both of those are relevant. In addition, I need to give Sadducee backgrounds and beliefs somewhere in here. So I think this first point, the fact that the dead are raised, is a perfectly appropriate place to speak to these ideas. Let's talk about briefly now the life, and I've got tons of applications and illustrations that can come out of both of these. But now I want to think about life to come. Life to come. Let's see, I had put different from this life, similar to this life. This one's going to be the most complicated point, the idea of the life to come. And part of the reason is because we don't have much information on it. On the one hand, it's not what we would expect. Because you can see one of the errors the Sadducees believe is they believe that the resurrection, they believe the life to come is going to be basically like our current life. That's the point of their whole parable that they say. And Jesus basically tells them, no, you're mistaken. And so Jesus points out to them verse 25 that they're mistaken because they don't understand what the life to come is like. So verse 25 compared to their parable. So that proves that the life to come is not what we would expect. But it's also similar to this life. And here's one of the big things I want people to get out of this sermon, is that we're not just waiting to go to heaven. That's not the idea. The idea is we undergo growth and sanctification now so that we are prepared for the life to come. And maybe that's a separate idea. Not just waiting to go to heaven, but instead God is preparing us for the life to come. And that's an important aspect that we need to recognize as well. So both are true. And getting this balance is essential. Oh, good illustration point. Ditch on both sides of the road. And you can see the Sadducees don't get the balance right, but I think in today's day and age we don't get the balance right either. We kind of go off in the ditch on the other side of the road. So this is roughly what I want to talk about on the life to come. The problem is there's not a lot of direct verses that I can go to that point out that the life to come is similar. Because Jesus kind of points out how different it is. Maybe it's the idea that he is God of the living. Verse 27. I could swing that. So that's an idea. And here's an opportunity to leverage other scriptures as well. So I can reference 27, but it'll also be a good opportunity to go to another text. So there we go. The dead are raised, life to come, and God is life. I think all of these are helpful, relevant ideas. In what ways is the life to come similar? In what ways is it different? That might be a point that we need to think about. Finally, God is life. Now, this has to do with Jesus' fundamental argument. Verse 26. And 27. And get rid of this now. Jesus' fundamental argument is God is a God of life, and so we ought to come to him for life. Catastrophic is now following. Catastrophic MC, thank you for the follow. I appreciate that very, very much. Thank you. Plus, I get to see my Paul Washer emoji. So, verse 26 and 27. God is life. And again, Jesus' argument is essential to follow at this point. Because our God is a God of life, so too his people live. That's his argument. because God is a God of life, so too his people live. And I like this as the third point because it's gonna lead well into the conclusion. It'll preach well, and I think people will resonate with that. So I like how this is developing so far. Introduction, I'm going to talk about various views surrounding the afterlife. A lot of people believe today when you're dead, you just die. Maybe some people believe in the resurrection. What do we believe about the afterlife, though? Do we believe in an afterlife? Do we truly live like we believe in an afterlife? Then the fundamental proposition, because the dead are raised, we ought to live. And once I've identified the proposition, I essentially just have to prove its elements. Point number one, the dead are raised. And I'm going to go through Jesus' argumentation where he talks about the dead being raised. Mark 12:24, Jesus replied, "Are you not in error because you do not know the scriptures or the power of God? When the dead rise, they will neither marry nor be given in marriage. They will be like the angels in heaven." Now, about the dead rising, have you not read in the book of Moses, in the account of the burning bush, how God said to him, "I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. He is not the God of the dead, but the God of the living. You are badly mistaken." And so that's going to be what I tie into here. The dead are raised. I'm going to go to Jesus' proofs about that. And then I've got plenty of room for application and illustration surrounding that, talking about how whether or not you believe in an afterlife is going to affect how you live. It's going to affect your actions. So, in fact, belief in an afterlife affects how you live. So I've got that. And that'll be kind of my application on this point number one of the dead being raised. Essentially 2 points of application. Believe that the dead are raised. Don't buy into the spirit of the age. And live your life as though the dead are raised. Believe that the dead are raised. So that's going to be one good point of application. Then, point number two, life to come. And here is where it gets a little bit difficult because we're going to have to describe what life to come looks like. And we're going to have to go into some details that, frankly, I don't have a lot of information on. Not even a lot of biblical information on. And so that will be my discussion of life to come. And then God is life. And this is going to be getting into where it is a little bit more application heavy. It's a little bit more emphatic. It's a little bit more encouraging, right? And so that's where this God is life point is going to go. So I kind of like how it's flowing with the title, The Life to Come, as the title of the sermon. Life to come? I'll just call it Life to Come, not The Life to Come. I like that. So that's kind of where I'm going with this. Now I've got a few things that need doing. First, we really need to flesh out the life to come. What do we know about heaven? What do we know about what it's going to be like? That sort of information is going to be essential if we're going to preach a good sermon on this topic. So first, I'm just going to search my library for books with the title Heaven in it. Let's just rank them. Heaven on Earth, Temple and Biblical Theology, Dante's Guide to Heaven and Hell. So here's a book by Morgan and Peterson on heaven. Looks like it's a systematic theology. So let's pull that one up. That one's going to be good. On the Heavens by Aristotle. Heaven Here and Now by David McLaughlin. That sounds really good. Especially because part of my point is about the fact that heaven is here and now. And in light of that, let me do a fact book search on heaven as well. Heaven. So I'm getting some decent hits in my dictionaries. Some of my preaching resources. Lots of illustrations on heaven. That'll be nice. Okay, God's realm. So we'll be able to talk about heaven. Let's continue looking for books. On the Heavens, Heavenly Banquet, Heaven, The Heart's Deepest Longing by Peter Kreeft. Kreeft is a good author, so I can bring this up and just browse through it. It's really important in your books, in your library. You don't have to read every book word for word all the way through. It's an important skill to develop, to mine books for resources, for information, for what you're looking for. And so, yeah, I've got 3 books here that would it have been nice if I could have read these before I preached this sermon? Sure. But this Systematic Theology on Heaven is 260 pages long. This book on Heaven Here and Now looks like it's kind of a standard monograph that is going to be at least 100 to 150 pages. And then this book by Peter Kreeft is this one's another monster, 280 pages, right? When throughout the busy week am I going to find time to read 600 pages on the topic of heaven? I can't. But you know what I can do?